Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you.
Good afternoon.
This is the early crowd. Look at you. It's good to see so much excitement. We'll get started in a few minutes. And Gunnar, we are going to have you pull up the PowerPoint.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So we have more people that'll be joining us, and we'll get started at 3 o'clock.
Bert. Mute. That way. Is it on now? That way. Is it muted or no?
It is muted.
Okay. That way, if you and I discuss something, it won't be picked up in the meeting. You know what I mean? There was a thing about people's names.
We'll share the agenda on the screen as well until we're ready to start.
Because I want to look at some of the PowerPoints. Where should I sit? Should I sit on the SID?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Glendra Lewis from Kencroft.
Good afternoon. We still have people joining, and we'll get started in about 2 minutes.
Perfect. I could not join via the link, so that's why I'm calling in.
Okay. We can hear you fine, but if you'd like, I can. I could forward the link again if that would be helpful.
I would appreciate that.
Also head out.
Okay. Just drop your email in the chat, and I'll forward the link. You cannot do that because you're on the phone. You want to give me your email?
Sure. It's Glendra, Glendra dot Lewis, Lewis, at kencrest.org.
Okay, stay tuned. Gunnar, are you able, I see in the chat that someone else needs the link. Would you be able to forward the link?
Yes, no problem.
Thanks.
Actually, it's okay. She's on. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. All right, Glendra, the link has been forwarded to you. And we will get started in about 1 minute. Thank you, Gunnar. All right, welcome everyone. My name is Elisa Velardo. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for DDS. And I want to welcome everybody this afternoon. This is the 7th Fourth Tuesday Forum that we've held, and I'm really excited for today's topic. We have a number of great presenters today to talk about various aspects of self-determination and self-directed services. We will, the format for the presentation is that we have a number of presenters. We'll have the presentations take place. If you have questions, you can either put your questions in the chat or wait to the end. We found that with these forums, during the course of the presentation, a lot of questions get answered. So we hold the questions to the end to make sure that we get through all of the presentations. And then our presenters will stay on and we will be happy to field any questions and hopefully have a nice discussion. Today's session is recorded and it will be available on our website. On the homepage, you'll see Fourth Tuesday Forums, and you will also find the link to the recordings and the agendas to all previous recordings, all of the previous sessions. In each of these forums, we have a combination of DDS staff that describe the service or the service option. We have individuals who are successfully utilizing the service option, family members, and support people. And today is no exception. So our first presenters, I'd like to introduce Amy Blazowski and Dory Michael Martusis, who are going to talk a little bit about supporting a self-determined life. So welcome, Dory and Amy.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent, just making sure. Thank you, Elisa. I'm Amy Blazowski, or Amy Blaze, easier to say, easier to spell. And I am the Self-Determination Director in the North Region, and I'm here with my counterpart, Dory Michael Martusis. And in the South Region, not sure if Denise is on, but I think she might have got held up in another meeting, but Denise Palladino is our South Region Self-Determination Director. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming and joining us. We're going to talk a little bit about self-determination and self-direction. So let's get started. So a lot of people get hung up on what is the difference between self-determination and self-direction. And so I'm going to give you a brief intro to what self-determination is. It's a philosophical or conceptual value, and it's learning about rights and having our voice to broaden our experiences, making choices about the way that we live, whether it be residentially, with our jobs, all areas and aspects of our lives holistically. It really it means taking control and taking responsibility, and we'll talk about a little bit of the foundation and core of self-determination. Next slide. So there's a few keywords that you should keep in mind when we talk about self-determination. That is freedom, support, authority, and responsibility. And so we want to take those four basic concepts, and of course there's so many more that go along with that, but we tried to kind of break it down into these four major areas. Ultimately, to allow people to have that ultimate control and ultimate authority over their independence, their autonomy. We completely believe in a foundation that encourages respect, dignity, and dreaming. And our little catchphrase is whatever it takes. We do it with creativity. So everybody has the right to direct their future. We all make decisions in our lives. We all want to make sure that we have authority over the choices and the decisions that we make, and also the resources, the people that support us, again, in all aspects of our life. Next slide. Some of the other principles that we talk about when we're looking at self-determination as a concept, as a philosophy, are choice, dignity, respect, relationships, control, dreaming, contribution to our communities. We look at fiscal conservatism, looking at how to manage our money, how to manage our staff, how to manage the resources that we have. And of course, whatever it takes. And you'll notice that with some of these core concepts, it really embraces sort of what we all would love to see in our lives on a daily basis, right? I mean, this is across the board. Anybody and everybody should have these principles established in their own lives.
Right. Thank you, Amy.
Dory?
Thank you, Amy, for walking us through the principles of self-determination. And like Amy said, we all want to live a self-determined life. So what is self-direction? What does that mean? Self-direction is a service model, a model that can be used to allow individuals to become more self-determined. Again, to Amy's point, it gives you the ability to have choices, who you want to live with, who you want to hire, and where you want to work. So that's what really self-determination is. It's the service model to get to a self-determined life, utilizing those funds to create a path to choose what you want to see in your life and make it happen. And the great quote here is self-direction is a path one can choose to become more self-determined. Next slide, please. So let's think a little bit more about feedback. Let's think a little bit more about.
I'm going to mute everyone to reduce feedback. Hold on one second.
Okay, so if we think a little bit more about self-direction and how this is as a service model.
Dory, when I muted everyone, I muted you as well. So sorry.
That's okay. All right, we'll try this again. Rewind. All right, so let's do a deeper dive into what self-direction is. Let's think about it a little bit more.
Bring it down.
And Amy shared information about when we want to live a self-determined life and we self-direct our funds, we think about choice, control, and authority. Self-direction gives waiver participants and families greater control over the services they receive, how they receive them, and who provides them. Next slide, please. Again, we want to think about, is self-directing your support where you want to go? Because there is a lot of responsibility involved with self-directing. So people who self-direct must be willing and able to take on a ton of responsibility. What does that look like? You'll be in control of a budget of funds, which will contain line items for different service options. You can select and arrange your services and your supports in your individual plan, and you'll work with your case manager on creating your individual plan and also using some of the life course materials, such as a week at a glance, to help you kind of have a visual of how that's going to look. And David, our broker, case management broker, will talk a little bit about that, and so will Jeremy later on in the presentation. The responsibility also falls with you to be accountable for using the budget to more effectively meet the needs and more effectively be efficient with use of public dollars. You are the employee of record, so that means you take control of everything. That's your role and your responsibility to make sure you're identifying the needs in the IP and all of those things are being executed with the use of the self-directed budget. You can hire, train, and fire any employees. Next slide, please. So I know we have a little short time to get all of this information to you. So the best place to go to get more information are resources on our DDS website. So we have an introduction to your hiring choices, making good choices about your DDS support and services, and a guide for consumers and their families. So all of this information can be found on our website. And if you have further questions, you can put them in the chat, and either myself, Amy, or anybody else who's presenting will be more than happy to share more information and answer questions. Next slide. So how to support an individual to self-direct. And we talked a little bit about this by first, you want to ask questions about self-direction. And obviously you want to learn more about it because you're participating in this forum. So then you want to create steps to self-directing, which we'll talk a little bit more about in some further slides and some further presentations. There's trainings that the employer of record can go through, which is part of the public partnership, PPL, and the direct support professionals also go through training, which is part of the College of Direct Support is a training that some of the direct support professionals have to go through to learn more about supporting an individual who self-directs. The most important form that we want to focus on here today is the Self-Directed Support Agreement, which is called the SDSA. That is the contract between you, the person that's self-directing your supports, and the Department of Developmental Services, saying that this allotted amount of money is what you're going to use to make those choices, to be autonomous, to make those decisions, who you're going to hire, what services and supports you want to see happen. Then you'll be assigned a fiscal intermediary, and we talked a little bit about the roles and responsibilities. Next slide. All right. So here are the steps to self-directing. First, you want to get engaged in the process of using the life course materials with your case manager. You want to identify some natural supports. You want to identify the pockets of time when you really need the supports. Maybe you might have a home health agency providing support. So this is a great visual so the team could sit around and figure out what works. What is it going to be a service package that works for the individual who is self-directing? Then you're going to obtain an allocation, choose a fiscal intermediary, and then develop the budget. I'm sorry, let me back up. Choose a fiscal intermediary, refer to PPL so you can learn how to be a good boss, how to self-direct. Do this, the SDSA, and then develop the budget. And then you go on to the process of hiring and recruiting people to work.
So we understand that this is loaded with information and acronyms, and we have such a limited time to explain, but I want to just really focus on the importance of the person-centered planning team. And so what you're seeing in front of you is what we refer to as the life course tools. They are an essential part of our individual plan. Every person-centered team has they're basically charged with putting together a person-centered plan along with the individual. If the individual that's being served by the department can write it themselves, we absolutely encourage that so that they will write that in the first person. But this is just a visual of the life course tools that we use. Next slide. So when we look at what a person needs, we use the life course tools to identify what services or supports or goods a person needs, and then we can plot out how we can address those issues. And this is just a little example of a person's day, what that day looks like, where the supports are needed, and how we might be able to address those needs. Next slide. Now, we mentioned the person-centered plan. The action plan, or what we refer to as the IP5, is an incredibly useful tool in terms of identifying a person's goals and looking at the objectives, the actions, the steps that someone would take in order to achieve those goals. When we look at someone's action plan, we can then better get an idea of what that person will need in order to achieve a comprehensive service package. Next slide. And so when we're looking at how to do that, how to put a budget together, an individual may become their own employer of record. The employer is the person that hires and manages the staff, or they may want to get some help from either a family member or someone that's close to them. And we would refer to that person as a sponsoring person. An employer of record can also be a sponsoring person, or you can have an employer of record, the individual, as well as somebody to assist them, which is the sponsoring person. Dory mentioned the support agreement. That is really where we identify who is in charge of what. And if you need help in a specific area, that's where we can actually plot out a plan to say, okay, you may need help here. Who's going to help you with that? Who's going to make sure that that is the, that your goals and objectives are getting met? Next slide. We are working closely with public partnerships, which we refer to as PPL. We've recently onboarded them to make sure that EORs are supported in their training needs to make sure that they have the best and most recent information about planning teams, the life course materials that we just shared. We will work with case management to refer to PPL to get that training in motion for any EORs and sponsoring people that want to get on board. But we're actually telling people that they can actually get into the training even if they're already self-directing, just to kind of use it as a refresher. But most of the people that we're onboarding are going to go through this training. And then we also talk about electronic visit verification, which we'll get into a little bit further down the road in this presentation when Lori is able to talk to us. Next slide. Just a quick kind of advertisement for our Connecticut DDS peer network. We've worked with existing EORs to be able to talk to people that might be looking for some more information, parent to parent, sponsoring person. Basically, it's to really just provide support and feedback to either someone who is already self-directing or somebody that might just be thinking about it and they're curious about it. Next slide. Next slide.
Right, so it's my turn to talk a little bit more about how to develop a plan and a budget to creatively support the needs of an individual. And we kind of talked a little bit more about that earlier on, but I just want to focus in where to begin. So developing a budget to support the individual plan and person's needs. Weekly support hours, weekly supports by hours, which you can also use the week at a glance to kind of figure that out. The life course material that Amy was able to show you really quickly, where it highlighted a family member, mom has to work or mom doesn't have support. So you can have a visual to plot out where the support hours are needed. How to use the waiver services, and also we have to line that up with the cost standards and cost guidelines. What is the individual budget? The individual budget is a database that case managers use to talk about, to articulate what line items they need. The amount and duration, the cost of the services and the supports being purchased or pursued, the cost totals of each line and the total of the overall budget, the date of the budget period, regional approvals, and identified fiscal intermediary, and then there's a comment section. So that's all internal information that the case manager, and David's joined us. He'll talk a little bit more about what his role is as a broker and how that translates over to self-directing your supports. We do have 2 fiscal intermediaries right now in the state, Allied and Sunset Shores. So what are they responsible for? Basically, they're the bank. You know, if I were to scale it down, that's what they do. They pay your staff to provide the supports. Again, we just want to preface that we're using electronic visit verification, EVV. You'll hear that a lot. That's an important thing. So if you start to self-direct your services and supports, your direct support professional will have to be using EVV. Again, this talks a little bit about the role of the fiscal intermediary. They're there to complete state and federal employee forms, pay staff, work with workers' compensation, work with the case manager when there's changes in the budget, when you have to make an adjustment in the budget. Also to help the onboarding process. Amy talked a little bit about that when you have a direct support professional starting, and also to help navigate the trainings and what trainings need to be done. And they're also there just to be customer service, to provide support so you can successfully self-direct. Say that 5 times real fast. Next slide. Again, we have 2 fiscal intermediaries, Allied Community Resources and Sunset Shores. And again, this talks a little bit about the documentation that they'll support you when you self-direct, and also some of the Department of Labor law compliance things that go on, and any other notifications, and working in tandem with the case manager / broker so that you can successfully do self-direction. Next slide.
All right, so this is just a quick little menu of sorts, and I like to refer to it as a menu. It is a partial menu, but it just gives you an idea of the types of supports that self-direction can be really influential in getting these services going for you. Supported employment, community-based day support options, individualized day, transportation, respite, behavior supports, specialized medical adaptive equipment, assistive technology, remote supports in some cases, and individual goods and services. Again, these are services with the individualized goods and services are really for only people that are self-directing. Next slide. This is kind of gives you an idea of what a budget would typically look like from the case management end. So you'll see several different line items, both in this is actually residential services and day services, but you might see transportation in there, personal support or background checks, activity fees, individualized home supports. So this is just a quick example. Next slide. The way that we basically keep our menu options in check is through our cost standards. We want to let people know what can be included in the IP6 budget, and provide those parameters just so that people understand what is allowed, what is not allowed in order for us to use the Medicaid waiver system. And we have cost guidelines that are also that kind of outline the rates. Our guidelines are sort of a quick guide. So it's really important that you know, we have the most recent version in the guidelines basically will help out a person to create their individualized service package. Next slide. And so just quickly to mention the self-directed support agreement. This is an agreement, we call it the SDSA. It's a tool that makes sure that individuals who choose to self-direct their services are really fully understanding their employer responsibilities. It's something that is necessary in order for us to have that mutual conversation around what's expected in terms of the responsibility behind self-directing, and also that relationship with your direct support professionals, or DSPs, as we'll call them going forward. Next slide. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to Jeremy Powell, who is a self-advocate coordinator in the West region. Dory, do you want to give a more comprehensive introduction for Jeremy?
Yes, my honor, my pleasure to introduce Jeremy Powell, who is our self-advocate in the West region. He's going to touch a little bit more upon his story with regards to him self-directing his supports as a self-advocate coordinator, and how to hire and how he's grown. It's a privilege for him to share his story, and I'm excited for him. So excuse me while I'm tripping up over my words. So I'm going to turn it over without further ado. I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy.
Thank you, Amy and Dory, both for the wonderful introduction. Hi, everyone. I am Jeremy Powell. I am a self-advocate coordinator for DDS in the West region. And today I'm going to just talk about supporting self-advocacy and self-direction and what it means. So here are the steps to hiring and managing a support person, whether it be a home support, whether it be a one-to-one support, or whether it just be a day support. So with that, you want to find an employee, whether it's through Facebook marketing or through word of mouth, through family or friends, church religions or something like that. Choose an employee, offering someone the job. So you don't want to offer the job to someone through a text message saying, hey, congrats, you're hired. You don't want to do a nice formal one. You want to do, hi, such and so, you got the job, and keep an employee. So those are the things that we're going to be talking about through this presentation. hiring and managing your own supports. So how to find and keep a staff. So meaning the process of finding a staff is you want to sit down with your caseworker, you want to go over your budgets like they did earlier in the presentation, where you want to talk about how many hours you have in your budget, how much the person is going to get per hour, and also how many days can the person work. So from there, you'll determine writing up a job description about your job, saying my name is so and so so. I'm looking for someone who's understanding the patient. The hours will be from 5 to 10 or 7 to 8, and the pay will be $17. And then from there, hiring and recruiting process is like again Facebook marketing, word of mouth from friends, brothers or sisters, or just someone that you worked with at a day program or an agency before. Managing employees, so meaning that you're managing their time schedule, you're managing their hours, you're making sure that they come on time to work, that they're presentable, and that you're ready to do what is necessary to do for the hours that you are working with the person. And then also later on in the presentation, we're going to talk about the separation or the termination process of letting go someone. Again, finding an employee, like I said before, talk to your caseworker. They'll explain to you how your budget works and how much money is in the budget, because you don't go over the budget. You want to stay within the budget frame and stuff like that. Next page. So again, you want to recruit somebody by word of mouth or local flyers by colleges, place of worship, libraries, paid advertisement like Indeed or CT Hires, internet, like I said again, Rewarding Works, Indeed, Facebook marketing. Facebook marketing is very popular from what I hear. So when you're doing the interview process for someone, you want to have the right interview questions. So meaning that you don't want to have interview questions such as, what's your favorite color? Or what do you do during the day? You want to have interview questions that are similar to what you're looking for, or how long have you been working with people with disabilities, or are you creative? Are you someone that is patient? How are you with flexing your hours of your schedule? How are you with managing different tasks at one time? So that way you can get an understanding of who the person is during the interview. Again, offering the job to someone, meaning you call them, you say, congratulations, you got the job. You'll sit together doing paperwork. While sitting there together, while filling out paperwork, they have to go through the DDS registry checklist, the background check checklist, motor vehicle checklist. So all the paperwork that they're doing is being handed to either Sunset or Allied. And then during the process, it may take a week or two for them to know who the person is. Hiring employees, again, like I said, doing the paperwork, the state and federal forms, the training material, the False Claim Act, the DD provider agreement, workers' comp information. So everything that's in the peer agreement forms is everything that you and your employee will go over while sitting together and doing the paperwork. Hiring restrictions. So again, individuals can't hire the following person. They can't hire themselves, unfortunately. They can't hire someone that who has been a convicted felony or has committed a crime. They can't hire their own spouse, or a civilized union partner. We do say that you can hire your own family, but I would say just be mindful of who you hire in your family, because even though you want to hire your own family, you don't want to hire someone that's like your cousin or your uncle, your auntie, your mom or dad, because them are your parents or uncles or brothers or sisters. And sometimes when people work for the individual, sometimes they feel like I don't have to listen to my boss during the time of their hours that we work. And you don't want to have that hassle of dealing with that. You want to hire someone that is someone that you don't know of, someone that's fresh blood. Managing and keeping your employees. So keep a list of emergency contacts and have a backup plan. So if a staff calls out, for like, let's say they go on vacation a week before, then you have someone else to fill in that position for that following week. Submit accident reports if required. Follow procedures for reimbursements as identified in the budget plan. Also, how to maintain a staff is by making sure you come up with group agreements. I know it sounds corny, but having rules and boundaries that way there's no miscommunication on each other's parts. Communication is very important when you have a one-on-one support, because if there's no communication, there's no point in me hiring the person that I have in front of me. So you want to set ground rules and boundaries, because that way you both respect each other. And when it doesn't work, yes, some people we have to voluntarily separate or unfortunately fire someone. In this respect, some people don't always want to just stay with the person or work with the person. So sometimes they may want something better in life, go to the movies or, become a doctor or a lawyer or something, or go to school. And this was only just something for temporarily. So meaning that, it's okay to let go of your employee. Sometimes if they want to leave, you have to let them leave. If they're not working right, you want to have a paper trail of what they didn't do right. So the first warning, you write it down, you email it to the person. The second warning, you have it, blah, blah, blah. You email it to the person. The third one, unfortunately, means I have to terminate the person because they didn't follow or do what they were asked to do as my employee. And now I am going to turn it over to a wonderful caseworker in the South region. His name is David. He's a case manager broker. And I'm going to turn it over to David.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeremy. All right. David Creatoro here. I'm a case manager in the South region at the Wallingford office. I've been in the self-determination division for 6 years. I've been at the department in total 8 years. So what I'm going to kind of do here is, of course, go over the slides, but also the main thing I'm going to focus on is the difference between us and other case managers, what separates self-determination case managers from the rest of the department. So if we want to go to the first slide here. Thank you. So, all right, case manager brokers assist individuals to identify support and service needs. They document this information in their individual plan and in their budget. So essentially, what that's saying is that the individual plan, the IP that we meet for once a year, must match up with the individual budget. So each line item in the individual budget, or most of the line items, I should say, should be included as goals in the IP. Not all of them, so not little lines like background checks and staff training and things like that, but other items that are being worked on, such as finding staff, I mean, that would correlate with staff wages in general, staffing lines in general, such as individual day support, individual home support, and such. Other line items that goals can be based around include specialized therapy. That's a line that can include speech therapy, art therapy, horseback riding, other ancillary services that can kind of enrich the individual's life, stuff that's not covered by Medicaid. Items to increase independence, that's another line item that a goal can be centered around, how often somebody's using an item that they need. So essentially, when we complete the IP, when we complete the budget, I say, we keep the IP in mind and how to center goals around those line items in the budget. Budgets are actually my favorite part of the job, or one of my favorite parts of the job. It's pretty exciting to start a budget from scratch and kind of go over. It's like putting a puzzle piece together. Other case managers may differ. Some like budgets better than others, but we're all pretty great at building them. Let's see, case manager brokers, we also negotiate for needed funds and are responsible for creating and designing each budget. So essentially what that's saying, we do encourage teams and individuals and families to stick within their allocations as much as possible. It's perfectly fine. Mistakes happen, other events happen. It's fine to move things around when needed, as long as they fit within the Medicaid waiver guidelines. If there's absolutely not enough money in the budget for a specific need, then we can always submit to PRAP for a one-time if it's a particular item or something like that that's going to be used once. Or additional annualized funding if it's an ongoing need, but we do encourage people to stay within their allocations if they can. There are expenditure reports that are issued from the FI every month. Us as case managers are to look them over, check for any discrepancies, check for any overages. Sometimes there are mistakes in these reports, and we absolutely encourage the employers, individuals, families to review these reports as well, just to kind of keep track of where they stand. All right, so case managers ensure that each line item adheres to the overall allocation and the waiver cost guidelines, cost standards. So I know that Amy briefly discussed the cost standards. We keep those very near and dear to us. Even after 6 years, I still glance at them once in a while to double check in case anything has changed. They are updated every once in a while, and I will share what's in there with the families if they have questions about what exactly can be covered. We are encouraged to stick to the cost standards as much as possible. There are certain items that are restricted, but for most items, there are lines that almost every need can go under. And we're pretty good at figuring that out and being flexible and seeing where we can fit different lines and what can go under different, what kind of items can go under different lines. And then also, what is not mentioned here is that we kind of liaise with the FIs, with Allied and Sunset. Any issues that pop up, any issues with staff, if they're not paid or something like that due to a discrepancy in the budget, we typically tend to get involved. We can contact the FI on the employer or individual family's behalf. And we essentially troubleshoot any issues that may arise. Next slide, please. All right, budget rollovers. So despite its name, funding from the previous year's budget cannot be rolled into the next year's budget. So essentially, if you don't use it, you lose it. Each new budget is a fresh budget. So for example, if a budget rolls on February 1st, you cannot use money from January 31st in that new budget. So that's why we encourage not only people to not go over their budget allocations, but also not to stay too far under them either. We encourage the budgets to be used to their potential max. Changes can be discussed outside of rollover. So at maximum, we recommend quarterly. There are issues that come up throughout the year, essentially, and staff may go over, adjustments may need to be made, different funding may have to come out of different lines. And, like I said, it is kind of a puzzle to figure out, and that's fine. But I would recommend quarterly at the maximum, so it doesn't become too complicated for all involved. So the budget system still is easy to understand, although the changes, are able to be followed. And then it says the process is seamless when there are no changes from the previous year. It's okay not to be seamless. It's our job. If there's anything, things change from year to year, as I said. So any changes from the previous rollover are completely fine. We can definitely handle that. I know Jeremy mentioned some recruitment strategies. We're available to provide resources for that as well. Although we don't go out and recruit staff ourselves, we recommend different websites and different means of recruitment, such as he mentioned rewardingwork.org. There's also care.com. And the interesting thing about care.com, it's a paid website. However, there's a line item in the cost standards that can be used to cover that membership. It's an advertising line, so that can pay for a monthly membership, a 3-month membership, annual, whatever you may need. And of course, there's social media as well, as Jeremy did identify. So to talk a little bit about my experiences and my caseload, I have a very diverse caseload with a variety of different needs. So one of the best things about self-determination is the versatility of this program. It can be tailored to different levels of need, depending on the employer and the individual and the families and what works for them. On my caseload, I have individuals in several different living situations. They live with their families. Some live independently. They rent a house or an apartment. They can have roommates who may or may not also self-direct, with which they can share expenses and other resources. We also have shared living. That's where an outside person comes and lives in an individual's home and provides both natural and scheduled support. So in a sense, there may be particular arrangements between the individual, their family, and that staff member as to whether or not they pay rent and board and things like that, but that's something separate that they would get into. I'm going to use a quick example of how a budget has kind of changed a person's programming and their quality of life in recent times. So I have an individual who lives with his mother. The mother is over 90 years old. So it's getting a bit difficult for her to provide all of the necessary care for him. However, he does want to stay at home, and he actually prides himself on being there for his mother, being available for her. But of course, we also work on planning for future needs. This individual receives an initiative. It's the Regional Elderly Caregiver Initiative. He does have a lot of natural support from family, but not enough to really create the difference in his life that is needed. So I sat down with the family and the individual, and we went over what this funding could be used for. It was a good amount of funding that was added to the budget. Initially his budget was on the smaller side. He had some self-directed staffing, hours for activities and such. But one of the lines, I did mention specialized therapy earlier. He plans on doing horseback riding, which is great. There's places around Connecticut. There's High Hopes and Rivendell Farm. He also he's diagnosed with cerebral palsy. So assistive technology has helped him out a lot as well. He has limited motor issues due to limited manual dexterity with his hands, completing certain tasks. So the budget was able to purchase him an electric toothbrush. His dental hygiene was kind of limited before that, as it was kind of difficult for him to get in there. But he's able to do a lot better with the electric one, and electric shaver as well. It's a lot safer for him to use. And also, most importantly, and I'll end soon on this, his stationary bike was also purchased through assistive technology. He does express that he wants to exercise more. He doesn't like the cold, and he's a little afraid of walking on the street and uneven surfaces at times. So he was able to purchase a stationary bike through the budget, and he completed 300 miles in the last 6 weeks, which is great. So we used that to set a goal for him at his IP, which was actually held last week. And that goal was 250 miles per month. So he helped to set his own goal. He was very happy about that. So because of some of these differences, they seem like small differences, but when I last saw him, I've had this case for 3 years. He was a lot happier and healthier than I've ever seen him. So it's just kind of a prime example as to how we can be creative and flexible and fit different lines within the budget that can enrich individuals' lives. And I will turn it over to whomever is next.
Thanks, David. That was great.
Thank you.
I am going to introduce next Anna Lee and Susan Lusick, who are going to talk a little bit about their experience in self-directing. Welcome.
Hi there, can you hear us?
Hi, guys.
We can. Yes, we can.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's Sue Lusick and Annalee Hughes here. Thank you for having us talk about our experiences. We were asked to talk a little bit about our experiences with self-direction, how we like it, how we use it, and I'll let Annalee answer that right off the bat.
I like it because I can choose who I want and what I want to do.
That pretty much sums it up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So a little more background. We have Annalee is, if you can't tell through the camera, Annalee is in a wheelchair and has a variety of challenges and limitations unique to being in a wheelchair. She's 23, so she's just gone through the transition process, and unfortunately the timing was pretty bad with COVID. But she originally in her high school transition program worked through an agency that had somewhat limited amount of success placing her in different working environments. Most of the jobs were your typical transition situations, wiping tables and swiping cards in a dining hall, or folding and returning clothes at the retail store, some limited data entry on the computer at the library, but nothing that she really loved to do. And we also applied to the search program and were not accepted there. And we had some experience dabbling with the customized employment through DDS that didn't pan out. So anyway, on graduation, Anna Lee made the choice to discontinue working with the agency. And don't get me wrong, she loved her job coaches and she loved all the people at the agency, but she wanted to choose what she was going to do going forward. And, you know, I think you guys have covered it really well already, but for us, that right there is kind of the key to what we and I really love about self-direction. We're constantly looking for ways to give her more independence, and this gives her not only, you know, autonomy, some authority, but obviously the independence of the choice, but also some responsibility for finding meaningful activities, because she's not sitting home all day, right? No.
I don't like to sit home.
No. So we are very lucky that we have a
Mhm.
fabulous full-time 40 hours a week PCA who also acts as her job coach when she is out and about in the community at work. And, you know, she has been able to find things to do that keep her engaged with people and her community and that fill most of her days. Right now she volunteers at the local food pantry in Vernon a couple of days a week, and we're working to try to get her back into the school system as an aide for a couple of hours a week. And yeah, that's one of the things that well, I want to tell us a little story. She wrote a book, Anna Lee wrote a book called All About Me. It's just a PowerPoint presentation, but it prints out and it flips through and it can run on, you know, on a screen. And it talks about having a disability and how we're all the same inside. We all have the same heart and breathe the same air, and it's nothing to be afraid of, and we can all be friends. And she would present that to the you know, the elementary school, the young kids, and that had a huge impact, I think, on them as they, you know, were learning how to accept and adapt to different, or people with different abilities in the school system. And it was a win-win for everyone. But, you know, between COVID and just people retiring, we haven't had the chance to get her back in to do that. I would say that I find that that's the biggest challenge of self-directing, is that as a parent working full-time, it's now up to us to become the job developers and scout out these opportunities, talk to employers or potential employers, find these places that can and will accommodate her and give her meaningful work to do. You know, COVID made it almost impossible, but even since things have opened up, it's still not easy at all. And other people have touched on the hiring part of it. We're very, like I said, very lucky. We have someone it's very dependable, and we haven't had the revolving door problem, but I could see how that would be, you know, a big challenge for self-direction as well, for any parents that are looking at getting into it. The last thing I wanted to mention is the EVV system. We have been 100% on the EVV system since the beginning of this year, at least, maybe even before that. And, you know, it sounds like a lot of work, but there is a lot of upfront learning curve and paperwork. But once you get on board with it, once you get online with it, it's so much more dependable than the old paper-based system. And, you know, you may still have to wait on hold for an hour or so to get a question answered, but it's going to be a lot less than before. So we would highly recommend anybody who's on the fence about trying it out. That's it for us. I'll just say we're very grateful to have the option to self-direct.
Don't make me say
It
this.
keeps our house much happier, and
I'm the boss.
Anna Lee gets to be the boss. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation, and I think I have some I think, Annalee, I have some note cards that you created. Is that, I thought so, that are gorgeous with original art on them. So you're involved in a lot of things, I know. You're very involved in the community.
Thank you.
So you teed it up perfectly because our last presenter is Lori Coughlin. And Susan, when you were talking about how sometimes it can be challenging to work full time and manage, Lori's going to talk a little bit about her role as an individual goods and services supervisor and how that can be a support when people are self-directing. So welcome, Lori.
Hi, Alyssa. Thank you so much for asking me to speak today. This is a topic that's near and dear to me. I have a great success story about a young man that I've worked with that I would like to share. But I'd like to first give a little bit of background about myself. I have a 34-year-old daughter, Kathleen, with intellectual disabilities and high needs. And 30 years ago, I found myself in a very challenging situation, blindsided by divorce, and I had 2 very young children and no family in the area. And my daughter required one-to-one care for her own safety. At that time, the options were fairly limited, but I had a very good caseworker who introduced me to self-direction. And she helped me secure a budget and helped me try to work on getting my life back on track. I was highly motivated to self-direct services. It allowed me the freedom to handpick very good people within my community with experience. And I was pretty resourceful, but I was, again, very motivated. I found great people. I was pretty selective about who I wanted to work in my home, and also with a specific focus on activities and goals that I set to have my daughter be more independent as she grew older. My experiences with this model were wonderful. I spent 16 plus years self-directing, which is why I try to assist families, because I certainly know firsthand some of the struggles that parents face with children with significant disabilities and trying to go back to work full time. And I know that self-direction is challenging for families, so it's my goal to also help others with this process. And I'd like to share a very cool story if I have time. There's one young man that I've worked with a few years ago. His name is Matthew. And I met Matt's parents about 4 years ago, and he was pretty miserable in a work program where he was working in a small group for 8 years with a very, very low needs. He had a level of need of a 1, but the agency convinced him and his family that this enclave of 3 people were the best situation for him. And after meeting with the family and spending time and talking to Matt and finding out what Matt really wanted to do, which was work in the public in a supermarket or a restaurant. He wanted to be around people. We discontinued, we severed the ties with that agency and worked on an employment initiative. And literally within 3 weeks, this young man was offered two different positions. He accepted a position with Trader Joe's and works competitively close to 30 hours a week. He receives raises every year. He receives incentives. He's extremely happy. and his next goal was to move out of his family's home. And at that point, he had the resources because he was working close to 30 hours a week. And his parents didn't have he didn't have DDS funding, but we did apply for some funding through a DSS program where Matthew could self-direct services, and he was awarded several hours a week, which allowed him to have staff. So we placed an ad on Facebook Marketplace, and Matthew was involved with the whole interviewing process himself. He interviewed the candidates. He chose a staff who he felt most comfortable with. And he proceeded to move out into his own 1-bedroom condo in West Hartford. He pays all his own bills, and he has these 2 staff that are still with him 3 years later. And he's very involved in self-directing his services as far as what he wants to do with the staff, who he wants to work with. It's just one of my favorite stories, and I wanted to share that. He also is involved, as we mentioned, the EVV system. I'd like to touch on that a little bit. It's an electronic oversight component for staff, and it verifies their hours and their payrolls. And most consumers, or some consumers, sign off at the time of the visit when a staff member is leaving, and the consumer will sign off on that time in real time. I also help some families or some consumers with an extra layer of oversight in case they run into any kind of issues with EVV and errors that can occur. And it certainly had its learning curve, but it's working very smoothly now for many families, and it certainly works well as far as efficiency. So that's really what I wanted to share today. Again, I've had great successes with self-direction. I've lived it, I've worked it, and it's worked very well for me and some families that I've worked with.
Thank you, Lori. And I know from my personal experience that you've been a great resource to many individuals and families. And so,
oh, thank you, Alyssa.
Of anybody better to capture that role. All right, so those are our presentations for today. And then we've had a lot of activity in the chat. And if you have a question and you have not had the chance to drop a question in the chat, you can also raise your hand. There is the little raise hand button icon on Teams as well. And some of the questions I know have been answered. There's some conversation back and forth, and so some of the questions may have been answered by further future other presentations, and some of the questions were answered by other participants, which is really cool. So the first question is regarding staffing and some of the challenges in finding staffing. And there are some particulars that can be, I think, probably have to be discussed directly with your regional liaison. But does anyone want to speak to how they have had success in finding good staff?
Well, if nobody has an experience, I can certainly offer some good news on the horizon, which is we have partnered again with Rewarding Work, and we're basically overhauling the system so that staff will be easier to find. I did post a little bit in the chat around the use of keywords. If you need somebody with a specialized skill, it could be anything. You can actually type in a specialized skill, and then those people with resumes that have those keywords in that will pop up. We're also doing a huge amount of marketing, and we're looking at how to onboard more DSPs, and also to make it easier for EORs to be able to access the site for free and get the people that they actually can interview and put on board based on those specific keywords. So I just wanted to offer that.
Thanks, Amy. And
Thanks.
That's exciting news about Rewarding Work. I urge people, I think it'll take a little time for those enhancements to be put in place, but they're in the works. And so I encourage people to take a look. Jeffrey, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I wanted to, so I work in individual family support for DDS, and we work with a lot of the individuals that may be in your program. And I wanted to know, was it considered double dipping for us to work or partner with these individuals that are looking for employees? Because I was told that the staff couldn't do it, but we are a great resource for helping because we work in that field already. So I just need clarity on, can we work with the individuals that are looking to hire people that they can work with and do things within the community?
So Jeffrey, you can certainly work for another family through Rewarding Work. That is certainly an option that you have. It needs to be separate from your state employment. So I would just make sure that you're going through ethics and the preferred channels to make sure that that is not going to be a conflict of interest with regard to who you're working with specifically. But we can address that in more detail if you'd like to talk about it.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
And then there was a note asking, and Jeremy's already responded to this. If you look in the chat, Jeremy has noted some of the resources that he uses to hire staff. Facebook Marketplace, Indeed, Connecticut Hires, and Rewarding Work. And then give some tips about really making sure that you're hiring somebody that will work for you. Let's see. Amy, as she said, included some information about Rewarding Work and some keywords to use when searching for that. There was an interesting question and from someone who's been self-directing for many years and says that is looking for alternatives. What do you recommend when somebody has self-directed for many years and is finding that it may be too much?
Dory, do you want to take this, or I
was gonna
can?
paper
Either or.
rock, scissors. Yeah, I think
Sure.
you know, if you're self-directing and you're using direct support professionals, if that's, we know it's time consuming to do all of this. We know it takes a lot of time. You can also reach out to an agency and see if an agency could provide the list of supports and services. Not all agencies provide the menu options of services, but there are some. So if you work with the case manager or the case management supervisor, even the self-determination directors, we can have a more intimate conversation about that. And how that works. I think Lori, it looks like your screen was going blue because you might
And-
want to add on to it. So I'll kick it over to
Well,
you.
the individualized services, goods and services supervisor, is
Is
also
another
another option.
And Lori,
Yeah.
if you want to add on to that.
Amy, were you also referring to agency of choice? Or no?
Dory was referring to agencies or agency with choice.
Okay.
I mean, we always try to get an individualized goods and services supervisor so that
Right.
people can continue to have that choice and control first.
Yeah.
So prior
that's-
to
Right, that's something that can be written into any budget. Individual goods and service supervisor, and that does help take a lot of the responsibility off of the parent's shoulders. You know,
Yes.
they can allocate anything from doing the payroll each week to scheduling, supervising, any portion that the parent wants to share or relinquish to an individual goods supervisor. And that is something that can be written into the budget and is available for families. And really, I think helps so many families to know that they're not necessarily in this by themselves, you know, because there is a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of work on the part of the parents. And in offering that service, it certainly helps parents make that choice to self-direct, knowing that they have somebody on board to help them with some of those responsibilities.
And just to dovetail off of what Lori and Amy said, you know, with the enhancement of rewarding work, we're hoping that that would be a filter, that people can filter out if they need an individual goods and service supervisor, if it meets their geographic location, you know, the qualification, how long the person's been an individual goods and service supervisor. So those are some of the hopeful enhancements that rewarding work will have. And even if you get a supervisor that speaks Spanish or a different language.
Right.
Or American Sign Language, you know, we want to just be mindful of those different nuances of what supports are needed. Oh, and
I
in the
think that
chat,
also speaks to, there was a question about the keywords. I think it was Leanne asking about keywords on job coaching. That's exactly the keyword that you would use. So
On rewarding work, keywords for finding rewarded work.
right. On rewarding work, you'll have the opportunity to input your keywords. So job coach or transition support would be a great a couple of keywords that you might want to put in. I would also suggest looking up some of the certified employment professionals that are available. That's certainly a web search that you could do, certified employment professionals in Connecticut. So.
and just really quickly, also, Amy and Lori, there's a comment about, you know, you can do a combination of self-directing your supports and agency supports. And sometimes we've done that, even with COVID, we've had to do that where, you know, the agency shut down and then people wanted to just self-direct their supports. And then once they were comfortable having people come back in the home, they did agency or a combination of the two. So again, there are options. So just, you know, if you talk it through, do the research, see what fits for what your needs are.
Exactly. And we embrace creativity. That's our number one. We want to be creative to be able to meet your needs because we're in human services. We sometimes can't just fit into a box with certain of these situations and people's needs. So we recognize that, and that's really what our self-determination, self-direction divisions are all about. It's trying to be creative enough to meet a person's needs and make sure that we have a complete and comprehensive service package to do so.
Thanks, Amy. We have another question in the chat. What are the guidelines around siblings being paid as direct support professionals?
So we have a family hire policy. It is something that you should look to your case manager or broker to discuss. There are opportunities for siblings to be paid, and we just want to make sure that the family member that's being paid is not a guardian or a legally appointed person, decision maker, right? The second thing is for family members to become employees. There would have to be a match in terms of that family member being able to meet the needs of the person that they're supporting in that family situation. So, for example, if you had, you know, a person that was 24 that was really into basketball, and that wanted to shoot hoops, you might not want to, it might not be the best fit to get grandma who has a limited mobility, right? So we just want to make sure that things are going to flow and make sure that somebody can physically meet somebody's needs as well as emotionally and otherwise, right? Dory, do you have anything else?
No, you articulated that spot on.
Thank you.
So there are a couple questions that are not particularly specifically SD related. One is, are parents involved in rating agencies and staff who work within those agencies that are on the DDS provider list? And I think within self-direction, certainly, if there was if agency supports were a part of the plan that was developed, and there was a concern with satisfaction with those services, you would talk with your broker, and certainly there is the option to exercise portability and choose other services. So absolutely, individuals and families, in fact, and self-direction of all services have absolute autonomy in changing the services that are in place. And then the other, also not specific to self-direction, but a question about respite. I want to know if DDS is planning to open more respite centers. We just did open this year a 12th respite center in Meriden. That's the newest respite center to open. It's the first that has actually 7 days a week. So most of our respite centers are 4 days, long weekend. But Meriden is a 7-day-a-week respite center, and so I think that was in the pipeline for quite some time. I think COVID slowed it down a little bit, but it's up and running. And so we are at 12 respite centers. I think that's what we had in the plans at this point. I will make a note to mention that one of the things we've done is outfit all of our respite centers as smart homes. And so when people utilize one of the DDS respite centers, they now have a wide range of smart home technology, assistive technology that can be used. And it's a great opportunity to demo equipment, find out what might be helpful, and then bring that back. And that could be then built into your budget if you're self-directing. Or we also have a number of opportunities for assistive technology. And so thank you for raising that question about respite. Let's see, people are leaving. There was one more question. Can folks with waiver funding go to the respite center? There are some guidelines around the respite center. And so I would recommend speak with your case manager and they can give you the parameters as far as it depends on how much funding you have. All right, a lot of expressions of appreciation to the presenters. I think you got a really good overview of self-determination in terms of the value and the concept, and then how to actually self-direct services. You also met some great resources. We have a lot of brokers that are on the call today, a lot of DDS staff. And so this is a great opportunity to just thank this whole team that works really, really wonderfully statewide to really meet people where they are and find flexible options that'll work. So this is a great, great resource, and I appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.